fight fans? Been gone for a while, did a little family vacay. Now I'm back. I'm ready to grind, ready to talk about all the fight talk, ready to talk about this fight weekend. Now, of course, I'm going to talk about some spoilers. So if you haven't seen any of these fights, turn off now. But if you have, let's talk about them, shall we? And the first one I want to talk about just so happens to be the UFC 282 card. Now, it was a decent card. Definitely not what we're used to. We just had some great cards throughout the year. We had, the Mahachev versus Oliveira. We had the Pereira versus Adesanya, and you just quite to name a few. And then even the fight that was supposed to go through was a rematch from the fight back in June, which was Prochaska versus Glover Teixeira, which is by far probably the leading candidate of fight of the year. What a fight that was, right? So more likely we would probably say I saw a little bit more of the same or maybe a little bit of the less. But unfortunately, that fight fell through. Prochaska got hurt, a really bad shoulder injury, according to Dana White, the worst shoulder injury he's ever seen. So that left us with Glover. They asked Glover if he wants to fight Ankalaev. Well, unfortunately, Glover pretty much said that, hey, I'm not ready for that kind of guy. But if you give me Jan, I will take on Jan Blachowicz. Well, unfortunately, UFC didn't want to accommodate. Glover Teixeira sat out. So now we have Jan Blachowicz versus Ankalaev. Well, it started off very slow, very, very slow. I believe Blachowicz won those first 2 rounds. You saw him with those ankle kicks or calf kicks, whatever you want to call them. Pretty much getting Ankalaev on his back feet a little bit. You see him hopping around. You could tell it definitely was bothering him. So it was, like I said, it was a very slow fight. There was a few takedowns in there, a few good strikes on there, but definitely nowhere near a caliber. This was a good fight for possibly a fight night main event or a co-main event, which originally it was. But it got boosted up to the main event. Like I said, Prochaska was unable to fight, so the light heavyweight title was vacate. This was for the light heavyweight title, undisputed light heavyweight championship. Yeah, this was definitely not what we were hoping for as a main event, but it's something that you cannot prevent. Sometimes you're gonna have some really great fights, sometimes you're not. It's just styles make matchups, and unfortunately, this style did not live up to what we really wanted it to be, and it did not give us a champion either, because unfortunately we got ourselves a draw. It was a draw. I believe Jan Blachowicz was on his way to winning, but Ankalaev came back in that 5th round and got on 2 of the judges' scorecards, if I'm correct, a 10-8 round. Pretty much was right there, hammering away, getting the best of Jan Blachowicz in that round. So we end up leading to a draw, and no champion was crowned. Well, later that night, I heard Dana White on the press conference, or post-fight press conference, I should say, and saying that we now have Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira for UFC 283 next month in January in Brazil. So, hey, we might get a crown champion there. But that's very unfortunate for this one. I would have loved to see Glover versus Jan Blachowicz, because if you guys remember, these guys fought, I believe, in Abu Dhabi last year in, I want to say late September or early October, around that time frame. It might have been one of those fights. And I remember it was like a free fight night, because of pretty much the whole fight card was all foreigners, and they didn't feel like maybe we were going to get a whole lot in the U.S. So, but it one hell of a fight night, one hell of a fight card. I believe he was Corey Sandhagen versus Peter Yan on that same fight. So it was a really good fight night, and that was actually a really good fight. Those two threw down a little bit. Glover Teixeira was able to get the better of Jan Blachowicz, who was the champion at the time. I think he submitted him by rear naked, if I'm correct. Not 100% on that one, but nonetheless, still really a good fight. And that would have been a fun rematch to have if they did take place. But unfortunately, I guess they really were leading more on Ankalaev, and Ankalaev is actually really upset because he feels like he's won. Jan Blachowicz even said in the interview he felt like Ankalaev should have won the fight as well. So it's unfortunate, but this thing's kind of happened. Dana White said the same thing. It kind of happens. There's not a whole lot you can do. You just, sometimes it's just all about what is up to you, and it's all about up to your corner. It's all about, how bad you really want it, and how sure you want to make sure that you leave it to the judges, because that what leads us into the next fight. And the judges are being brought up a lot regarding this fight. I'm talking about Paddy Pimblett versus Jared Gordon. Yeah, Jared Gordon was pretty much, looks like to me, my personal opinion, was pretty much owning Paddy Pimblett in those first couple of rounds, and then did the worst mistake possible and pretty much hit the gas, hit the gas pedal, pretty much stomped on that gas and did not do anything really in that third round. Where on the other hand, I've heard obviously Paddy Pimblett, seen his interviews, seen the fight. He does feel strongly that he won those two rounds, the 1 and 2, lost the third. He is talking about his ankle being hurt and his ankle being compromised. It is what it is, but nonetheless, I feel Jared Gordon was landing the more cleaner shots. I seen Paddy's hands lower a lot, being lower, his chin high, and this is something I've seen in multiple of his fights. He doesn't have necessarily a lot of head movement going on in those fights, in those rounds. And that's something I'm always questioning because, of course, we see how Paddy Pimblett is after fights. Like, he balloons up, and we just wonder, like, dude, how seriously are you taking your training? He talks about how serious he is, and that's good. It's good that he is very serious about it, but just looks can be very deceiving too. Or it could be just saying the truth because it's like, no, it doesn't look like you are. And especially if you're coming in the exact same way you came in last time. If you're ballooning up that much, how much training are you actually doing? Post fights, at the end of the day, this is your bread and butter. So we would hope that he trains a lot better and a lot more. Well, Jared Gordon is a very tough test. We all believe that this was going to be his toughest test today, but unfortunately, it wasn't. Unfortunately, he got the victory over the judges. The judges feel like he won, even though a lot of the fans and a lot of the critics felt like he lost. And I'm right there with them. I kind of felt like he lost. I felt like Jared Gordon just did a little bit more than Paddy. I can't see it necessarily giving it to Paddy. I know a lot of times you'd be like, well, maybe you could have done it. Just that Paddy did a little bit more. But I just feel like Jared Gordon just did more than enough to edge this out on Paddy. And it's unfortunate because I really don't see him moving up the ranks after this. You want him to. You want him to go further in. You want him to go against like someone like a Tony Ferguson, a Dan Hooker, or somewhere around those guys, or Rafael Dos Anjos, or Gamrot. But now, like, you see the struggle that he had with Jared Gordon. You're looking at these other guys who are a higher level, a much more higher level. And the only way he's going to get better is obviously having to face someone just as good as he is, if not better than he is. But unfortunately, we don't know how that's going to plan out now because we just seen the struggle that he had with this guy. Now, who knows? Maybe he came into this fight compromised. Maybe his ankle was hurt. He was already talking about his hands, but I believe he hurt his hand in the fight when it comes to that. But still, I don't feel like he is quite ready just yet to get to that next level. I was talking about championship status next year. I really wouldn't do that. Good God, the things that Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, and even Justin Gaethje, oh my God, even Islam would do to this guy. It would not even be a fight. It would not even be a fight. I remember when they were talking about Paddy, how big of an event that would be if he faced Conor. Now, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. I won't think Conor McGregor is coming down to the 155 anytime soon. We already see him. He's a walking tank. He is like literally the biggest he's ever been in his whole career. So with that being said, would it be a big event? Absolutely, because you got a superstar and you got another upcoming superstar, and then we don't know how much Conor has left in the tank. So with that being said, would it be a big fight? Maybe passing the torch? Yeah, absolutely, because we know maybe Paddy Pimblett can be that next superstar. But he's not having that kind of status that Conor did. Conor came in there with like a steamboat, and just ran over everybody and made it look super, super easy. So that's like almost once in a lifetime thing. Paddy's still coming in hot, and he's still having a lot of fan base, and he's getting a lot of people's attention. But do I feel he's ready for that upper echelon guys, those upper status guys? Not so much. Not yet. But who he's ready for, I would like to see him, just because they're towards the end of their career, and this could be a good bump for him. I would like to see him possibly against a Tony Ferguson, because Tony Ferguson has not looked the best in his last 4 fights, obviously. He's already lost, I think, 4 in a row, maybe 5. somewhere around that time frame. I can't remember his last win that he won. I think he won against Donald Cerrone, and that was it. After that, he got hurt, and then after that, the fights fell through with the COVID and such and such. Then he won and lost against Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Benito Dariush, Michael Chandler. So yeah, yeah, it's been a tough road for Tony Ferguson. So this will actually be a good fight for Paddy, to see if he's really ready for this, because Tony Ferguson, regardless of how his fights have been, he's still a really tough fighter and a really tough dog regarding everything. Regarding doesn't matter how many times you lose to Tony Ferguson, he is still one hell of a fighter. So I would like to see that next, possibly, because I know Tony Ferguson is out of the top 10, and he's up there anywhere between, I think, like 11 to 15. He could be 15 if I'm correct. I'm not sure. But that would be actually very interesting for Paddy. So the next fight I want to talk about is the Darren Till fight. It's unfortunate. I believe he fought Duplessis. Forgive me if I'm saying that name wrong. Darren Till did look decent in that fight. He looked a little decent. He looked a little good, but he looked a little shaky and just, I don't know. He just looks like he couldn't really pull that trigger. He didn't really look like Darren Till of the old. He looked like he was landing some. He looked good. He was landing some strikes. He was going for certain things that he used to do. You could tell the way he was standing, the way his stance was. You could tell everything that he was like trying to be that old Darren Till like we're used to seeing. But it just didn't look like he couldn't really pull the trigger. And if I'm correct, he actually mentioned that he actually said that in his one of his interviews that he did, that he just felt like it's just mental. He cannot pull the trigger anymore. And yeah, and it was labeled fight of the night, and it was a really good fight. One of the best fights on the fight card. We know that we know now that Darren Till had injured his knee, and I think he may have done it in the first round, if I'm correct. I don't know 100%, but I could be wrong on that. But still, you could tell that maybe he was hurt and he was compromised in the rest of the fight, and that's why he really wasn't pulling that trigger so much. But he also says himself that it was also mental, like he just couldn't do it mentally, really couldn't do it anymore. So with that being said, what could be next for Darren Till is still very much up in the air, because he had one hell of a promising career in his earlier days. We remember when he came in and he fought Donald Cerrone and just steamrolled over him. Then he had a really good, I want to say, sparring match with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and then got the victories on both of those fights, and then gets a title shot against Tyron Woodley, who was the welterweight champion at the time. He gets submitted by Tyron. I can't remember. I think it was maybe an armbar. And then goes up to middleweight, fights Calvin Gastelum, wins the fight, and unfortunately after that, it's just been downhill for him. It just seems like he couldn't get the right momentum going, and he's just constantly having injury after injury after injury, and this really prolonged his return. His last fight was against Derek Brunson, which he got stopped in, and I believe he went in there injured. I can't remember what exactly injury it was. I think it may have been the shoulder. I think it may have been or the knee. One or the other. I remember he was injured in that fight 100%, and he just took that fight. More likely it was the knee, if I'm remembering that correctly. So with that being said, yeah, it's really terrible. It's really terrible. I really enjoy Darren Till. I do believe he brings in a lot to the table. Oh yeah, I forgot he actually ended up getting knocked out by Jorge Masvidal after that Tyron Woodley fight. Forgive me. So that was one of the other fights he ended up losing. So he's actually, I want to say, now he may be 6 in his last 7 fights, I want to say. Like I said, you got Tyron Woodley, he lost. Jorge Masvidal, he lost. Calvin Gastelum, he won. And then you got Derek Brunson. I believe I'm missing another one in there. Excuse me, forgive me if I'm missing him. But yeah, he's basically has he's basically won one fight in his last 4, 5, or 6 fights. So, and that's not good. That's not good. I know the UFC usually cuts you after 3 fights lost. But because I believe of his popularity, because of how exciting he can be, and because even how entertaining he could be, the UFC has kept him around. But after this, I just don't know. Like, what can you do with Darren Till after this point in middleweight? My personal opinion, what I would like to see Darren Till do is maybe dedicate himself a little bit more to his weight, and maybe go down, because that's where he was actually doing good. That's where he was actually winning fights. He won a few good fights in that in the welterweight class. Like I said, he beat Donald Cerrone, beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Fortunately, I think he took in Tyron Woodley way too early. But hey, you know what? He actually could do well against some of the other contenders out there, But I know his friend Hamzat Chimaev is in the welterweight class right now, is also bouncing around from middleweight class too. So we never know what could happen there. I'm sure those two could avoid each other eventually. I'm sure Hamza would probably move into middleweight one day down the line. Either that or maybe take a break from the UFC and see if he could go hit the regional scene. Maybe even join Bellator, get his confidence back, learn to build something, because he's only 29 years old, if I'm correct. He's really young at this point. So with that being said, yeah, I could really see him even trying to fight some of these other guys in different, maybe even PFL. I know a lot of people have made some more money doing it at these other organizations, because you just don't know. It's nothing against Du Plessis. I'm sure he did a really good job. He did a really, I'm sure, he worked his hardest, and, it's nothing against him, but just being the fact that Darren Till is such a big, has a big fan base, we definitely would love to see him more. But that's it, guys. That's my fights. That's the fights that I was looking into. I know Ponzinibbio was in there. He was actually in there. I can't remember the guy's name. Forgive me. But I know he was getting knocked around. And then they finally told him that, hey, you're losing this fight. You're losing this fight. Get in there and go after it. Because he was getting picked apart. And this guy, this young up-and-comer guy that, Ponzinibbio didn't train for, he was training for Robbie Lawler. We were supposed to see Robbie Lawler versus Ponzinibbio in this fight. And that would actually be a very good fight. But unfortunately, I think Robbie Lawler was hurt. Can't remember exactly what for, or maybe some undisclosed, something very undisclosed with the Robbie Lawler. So that's why they got Ponzinibbio a replacement. And he was getting knocked around by this young guy, this young up-and-comer. And in the first 2 rounds, and I believe his coaches had told him, which I even hear later on, that he's losing this fight. He needs to go for a knockout, and that's what he did. That's what he did. So he went in there and he got that victory. And so it was a very entertaining fight as well. It's a very unfortunate that we didn't get to see a lot more from the co-main event. I know we're riding really high on that one because, Paddy Pimblett is a big name, is a big star. And I don't know what exactly is to come next for Paddy. Not sure what's going to happen with Darren Till. We're yet to be seen. And even Dana White had mentioned that his stock doesn't go down from this. So, maybe more likely we might see him in the UFC, but against who? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to see. And yeah, we already know at the when Dana White was talking after the fight in the post-fight show, he had mentioned Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill next month for the vacant light heavyweight championship. So that should be interesting. That should be fun. We'll definitely talk more about that later on down the line when it gets closer. So guys, appreciate you watching. If you let me know what you guys thinking about these cards. What was your fight? Let me know what was your favorite fight on the card. Let me know what your favorite knockout was, or your submission was, or what do you think fight of the night should be. Let me know, and let me know what you're thinking about it. Hope you enjoyed the fights, and talk to you guys soon. Appreciate it, guys.